Good afternoon. Welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. I'm Len Calabrese, President of the Board of Trustees. The Cleveland City Club was founded nearly 90 years ago by far-sighted individuals who believed in the importance of free and fair speech, no matter how highly charged or controversial the topic. They were committed to civil discourse about serious issues of the day. They thought that was a good thing in and of itself, but many of the founders also hoped such dialogue could be an alternative to guns and bombs. I share that hope, faint as it may be in this historical moment, riven by so much violence and innocent suffering. Few areas of the world are marked by more disturbing scenes of violence than the Middle East right now. The conflict between Israelis and Palestinians has a long history. One of the major parties since 1964 has been the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO. Hasan Abdul Rahman, our speaker today, is the PLO's chief representative in the U.S. Prior to that, he spent 8 years in New York as a member of the PLO Observer Mission to the United Nations. Born in Ramallah on the West Bank, he left in 1964 to study in Amman and Damascus. He earned a BA in political science and a master's in public administration at the University of Puerto Rico, and was a PhD candidate in comparative politics at the City University of New York. He is a frequent spokesperson on television news shows. And now, without further ado, we will have Hasan Abdul Rahman. Mr. Rahman.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be here today, and I'm honored that I was invited to share with you the Palestinian perspective, not only on the past, on the history, but also our hopes for the future. The Palestinian-Israeli conflict perhaps is the conflict that was and still is the most covered and written about conflict in the whole history of mankind. Yet I believe it is one of the least understood conflicts, especially in the United States. And that is because the Palestinian side of the story was not told by the Palestinians themselves. And that's why I appreciate the opportunity here to be able to give our side of the story. And I must tell you, I don't pretend to speak for Israel here today. I'm speaking for the Palestinian side. And I hope that my presentation will shed some light about the plight of the Palestinian people, their suffering, and their hopes also for a future peaceful existence on part of their historic homeland. I'm one of those Palestinians who, from the very beginning of my official involvement of the PLO in 1974, believed in the two-state solution, a Palestinian state on the West Bank and Gaza, living in peace with Israel that is within the 1967 boundaries. And when we started out, we were a very small group of Palestinians within the PLO who advocated this position. And some of us really paid with their life for that position. But we persisted because for us it was not really only a matter of what is just and what is unjust. It is also a vision for the future of the two peoples who are living today on the land of Palestine. Because if we would continue to talk about only our historic rights in Palestine, we will continue to be engaged in conflict. And I thought that peace probably sometimes worth making sacrifices for. Unfortunately, 27 years later, my dream has not been realized, and the dream of many, many, many Palestinians. Today, the Palestinian people, all of them, without exception, still live either under a foreign illegal military occupation, Israeli occupation, or live in exile as refugees. But I believe today we are closer than ever to achieving the objective that I believe we are committed to, and that is the two-state solution. But again, I believe that this opportunity that I believe exists today can be destroyed tomorrow. Some speak of a crossroads in the Middle East. I believe we are at a cliff, not a crossroads, at the edge. And any push either to either side can change the course of the history of the Middle East. Before addressing the opportunities and the challenges, I want to say a few words about the nature of this conflict. This is not a Muslim-Jewish conflict. It has never been, and I hope it will never become, at least from our point of view. If we are proud of any part of our history, as Arabs and as Muslims, it is the years of coexistence between the two faiths in Spain, in Damascus, in Baghdad, in Cairo, in Rabat, in Marrakesh. There has never been in the history of the Muslim Arab world any systematic persecution of the Jews. On the contrary, both Muslims and Jews were persecuted by the Catholic kings in Spain during the Inquisition. I'm reading the book Leo the African by Amin Malouf, in which he narrates the history of that period of the fall of Granada and Cordoba and the expulsion of the Muslims and the Jews from Andalusia into the north of Africa, and how the two communities built Fez and Meknès and the other cities that are known today in the northern part of Africa. And anti-Semitism is not an Arab or Muslim trait. It is a European phenomenon, because we are Semites also. The Arabs and the Muslims are the children of Abraham, in the same way that the Jews are the children of Abraham too. And that's why we call each other cousins. So why then, if this is the case, why is this conflict? And what it is all about? From our perspective, this is a conflict between Zionism and Palestinian nationalism. Zionism being the nationalism, modern nationalism of the Jews of Europe, and Palestinian nationalism because we are the people of the land in which Zionism planned to create a state for the Jews. When the immigration of Jews from Europe to Palestine started, they did not come as a community that was fleeing persecution to live as all other immigrants arrived into different nations, like, for example, America, to live as Americans. They came with one idea, and that is to create a homeland for the Jews, thus excluding the indigenous native population. And this was the source of the conflict from day one. There was a mutual exclusion there. Zionism wanted to create a Jewish state. By definition, a Jewish state does not have a place for non-Jews as equal. And the Palestinians wanted a Palestinian state that does not allow the creation of a Jewish state. And so the two communities, the newly immigrant Jews from Europe who were arriving into Palestine to establish a national homeland for the Jews, and the native population who felt that their existence as a nation was threatened. And that's when the conflict started. The indigenous population of Palestine, who were Christian Jews and Muslims, felt threatened by those who were coming from outside to create a state that is different from the realities and the culture under which they lived. And of course, like in every colonial settler situation, you have resistance. The Palestinians resisted. Palestine at that time was part of the Ottoman Empire. But the Turks did not change neither the language, nor the culture, nor the history of the people. So an old, aging empire has ruled over many parts of the world. And the Arabs were left with their autonomy there. They have their own traditions, their own heritage, their own culture, which was not in conflict with what was going on in Istanbul and Constantinople. So and then we have the First World War, and a new colonial situation emerged in our region. And that new colonial situation is carried on by Britain, becoming the mandatory power over Palestine. And Britain, that was allied to the Arabs in the First World War for their own independence from Turks, was also allied to the Zionist movement in Europe. And it gave conflicting promises to the two peoples. They gave one promise to the Sharif Hussein of Mecca, promising him independence and kingdom in all of the area of the Middle East, and at the same time promising through the Balfour Declaration to the Jewish community a homeland for the Jews in Palestine. And so we have here a conflicting two promising. The Arabs who wanted to become independent from Turkey, from the Ottoman Empire, joining Europe in the Second World War for their own independence, and yet this independence was threatened by another promise in the eyes of the Arabs that was given to the Jewish communities. And the Arabs then felt that England, who did not own Palestine, gave to a people who did not deserve Palestine, because there were people living in Palestine. How can you offer other people a land that is inhabited? Nevertheless, I'm talking about this part of the history so we can understand where we are coming from. Not if we do not have a correct version of history, like they say, we are condemned to repeat its mistakes. And I'm one of those Palestinians who were willing to turn this page and open new page. And we did, and we still are willing to open this page. But we cannot ignore this history. In 1918, the Jewish community in Palestine was less than 7% of the total population. 93% were Palestinian Christian, Muslims, and Jews. And the newly Jewish immigrants created their own colonies that did not mingle with the indigenous population. They didn't even care to learn the language of the country. And like Miron Benvenisti, the Jewish Israeli historian, said, we viewed the Palestinians as part of the flora and fauna of the land. We did not see them as people. And his father, Miron Benvenisti's father, who is a very famous Israeli, in his book, says that his father was the geographer who really wrote the maps. He said, we wanted to recreate a new reality in Palestine where we do not acknowledge the existence of Palestinians in this land. Because once we did, we had to change our mind. And therefore, we have to be ignorant of those people. We saw them as Bedouins. We saw them as part of the flora and fauna. That's the expression he used. And so, those people who were not part of the flora and fauna, because Palestine at that time was classified under the British mandate as Class A, ready for independence, like Syria, Lebanon, and other parts of the Levant. England had its own interests. The Arabs had their own aspirations and ambitions. And without going into much of the history, by 1948, when Israel was created by a resolution of the United Nations, as a result, the next day, we have Palestine ceasing to exist. And the Palestinian society was dismembered. And overnight, I was 4 years old in 1948. And when I was born, I had a certificate saying that nationality Palestinian, birth of place Palestine. All of a sudden I became a Jordanian. And the other Palestinians in Gaza became Gazans. And the Palestinians in the Galilee became Israelis. And I grew up to see Palestinian refugee camps in Al-Jalazon, near Ramallah, in Al-Am'ari, in every single city of the West Bank and Gaza. And I, together with my generation of Palestinians, were not allowed to identify ourselves as Palestinians. And we became stateless people. And we became chased from one airport to the other. And the story that was told that we did not exist, and unfortunately I see this piece of paper, and I'm sorry that it is yellow also, saying that there are facts and myths. The Palestinians did not exist. And they were not expelled from their homes, just walked out. While Benny Morris, the Jewish historian, the Israeli historian, says that Rabin himself escorted 15,000 Palestinians from Lod and Ramla over the mountains of the West Bank until they arrived the city of Ramallah. You know, denial does not help the confidence that we need to build with each other and among each other. We have to acknowledge the injustice in order to be able to correct it and overcome it. This is the case with human beings anywhere. And American Jewish communities that help to perpetuate this denial of responsibility of Israel, and that Israel is right always, does not help this effort. It does not. It does not. Because we want to understand what happened so we can move beyond it. We cannot, as Palestinians, and I condemn anyone who deny the Holocaust, for example. Because we have to understand that this is part of the Jewish psyche. It's a Jewish experience. And you cannot just overlook it and just ignore it and say it did not exist. It existed. And we, the Palestinians, have to sympathize with the victims of Holocaust more than anybody else. But that does not justify for the children of the survivors of the Holocaust to inflict pain on the Palestinians. Under no circumstances. It does not make it right. I don't want any upload, because this is a very serious and important thing. Believe me. I want this to be a moment in which we reflect on what happened, so we can really move forward. Because it's not only the Palestinians who are threatened, but also the Israeli people are threatened. We both need to work together. We both need to understand what is needed. And like Benito Juarez said, peace is the respect of the rights of others. Because if you do not respect the right of others, you cannot expect to have peace. You cannot. And we, the generations who were victimized by the establishment of the State of Israel, came back and said, we want to make peace. And we accepted 22% of historic Palestine as the territory over which a Palestinian state to be established. And we signed an agreement with Israel. It was the agreement that was signed between Yasser Arafat and Yitzhak Rabin on the south lawn of the White House. And many people Because also, I read in this fact and myths and facts paper that the Palestinians are responsible for what's happening today, because we rejected a great offer that was made to us by Ehud Barak in Camp David. Let me say a few things about the Oslo peace process, because I know that we are short for time. But it is very important to say the following. The Oslo process was a historic compromise by the Palestinians. Yasser Arafat signed on behalf of the Palestinian people away what the Palestinians claimed to themselves, and that's Palestine. He signed away 78% as the place for Israel to exist. And Yitzhak Rabin signed to a process that will conclude Israel's occupation of the Palestinian territories and allow the establishment of an independent Palestinian state. That is the process. That is the deal that was made in Oslo. What happened? On the Palestinian side, there were few Palestinians engaged in violence against Israel. At the beginning, before even the Palestinian Authority took root in the West Bank and Gaza. And on the Israeli side also, the extremists killed Yitzhak Rabin. The death of Yitzhak Rabin in the hands of the Israeli extremists and the actions by some Palestinian extremists against Israel did not affect fundamentally the situation. We continued the negotiations until Mr. Netanyahu was elected. And he put the whole peace process on hold. We came to Wye River and we signed an agreement with Israel in Wye River that would have led to a redeployment of Israeli troops. We came back from Camp David, and instead Mr. Sharon was the foreign minister of Israel. He went on Israeli television and called on Israelis to occupy mountain tops of the West Bank to build the new Jewish settlements. And 40 Jewish settlements were built after we had signed the agreement in Wye River. And when we addressed ourselves to the American side, this is a violation of the agreement. Mr. Clinton said, focus on the objective. Let's forget about this for the time being. When the Israeli army continued to have checkpoints humiliating the Palestinians on a daily basis, I myself spoke to Danny Yatum at the house of Ehud Barak in August 1998 in Kochav Yair. I said, Mr. Yatum, I come here once every 2 months, and I'm watching the Israeli army humiliating the Palestinians. This is not a behavior of an army that is an instrument of peace. This is a behavior of an army that wants to continue the occupation. And if you do not change the Israeli behavior in the Palestinian territories, and the Jewish settlers who are mostly from Brooklyn, New York, who are armed by the Israeli army, who are harassing the Palestinians in their villages and their towns and taking over their land, you will have an explosion at our hands. Because the average Palestinian does not see you and me sitting here and having dinner at your house. The average Palestinian see Israel in the Jewish settler in the West Bank and in the Israeli soldier. And both are armed and both are symbols of oppression. The soldier is there to humiliate the Palestinian, and the settler is to take his land. They don't see you and me. And they do not see the Israeli poets and writers and journalists. They see only the settler, because those are the ones who are involved in the daily life of the Palestinian. And unless you change your behavior, we are going to have a big explosion at our hands. Because the checkpoint to protect a Jewish settlement in the West Bank isolates a whole town. Take the 400 Jewish settlers in the city of Hebron and the 180,000 people who live there. Just for them to walk in the street, for the 10 of them, for the 10 of the Jewish settlers, the whole city, 180,000 people, can go under curfew. And then the Israelis ask why they don't like us. If that is your behavior towards the Palestinians, why they would like you? It is not the books, it is not the articles, it is the behavior. No amount of textbooks, no amount of articles can have the power of a child seeing his father slapped in front of him by an Israeli soldier. No. Because that is the picture that remains in the eyes and in the mind of the Palestinian kid. No amount of writings would have the power of seeing a Jewish settler carrying a gun and walking into the streets of a town of the West Bank, or chasing away a farmer from collecting the fruits of his olive tree. And I'm glad to see that many Israelis in the last harvest of olives went to assist Palestinian farmers and protect them from the settlers while they were collecting their olives from their trees, especially in the area of Tulkarem. So this is what we need to focus on, not whether I make an argument and I score a point. No, because scoring points, this is not a public relation issue. This is an existential issue. This is an issue that affects the life of every single human being. It is not to be debated on American television and who wins against whom. That's not the issue. The issue is there, on the ground, because those are the people whose life is intertwined. The same air that is breathed by the Palestinian is by the Israeli also, the same stream of water for both. And when you have Israel occupying the West Bank for 36 years, where the Palestinians are denied their very basic human and political rights. Not one single classroom was built on the West Bank while the Israelis were collecting taxes from the Palestinians during 35 years. Not one single room in a hospital was built. Not one single telephone line was extended in 29 years of Israel before we arrived in 1994. And I asked Shimon Peres about it, and he said it is shameful that we did not do it. But shameful is not sufficient to explain it. And today, when Mr. Sharon launches his attack on the West Bank, he does not go after the armed men. He destroys every single school and every single office on the West Bank. He destroys the infrastructure of the Palestinian society. And that is not the prescription for coexistence. It is not. For us to live as people next to each other, we have to respect each other. And I'm not saying that the Palestinians did not make mistakes. But that's not my job to speak about the Palestinian mistakes. I'm here to speak about the Israeli mistakes. I'm sure that you will have an Israeli who will speak about Palestinian mistakes. And there are many. So we did. But the issue here is really how to get out of this quagmire that we are in. I am encouraged very, very cautiously by the efforts of President Bush and the international community to move us out of this cliff we are in. They have proposed the formula. Colin Powell, in his vision speech that was made in Kentucky in November last year, said that Israel must end its occupation of the Palestinian territories. A Palestinian state needs to be established. A fair and realistic solution for the refugee problem. The Palestinians recognize the right of Israel, and the Arabs establish relations, normal relations with Israel. Those same principles are also included in the Arab peace initiative that was adopted by the Arab Summit last month in Beirut. So it has become also the Arab position. And whether we do it today or we do it 20 years from now, this is really the lines of a settlement. There is no other acceptable settlement. Unfortunately, Mr. Sharon did not respond positively after his meeting with President Bush, notwithstanding the efforts of the president in trying to persuade him. He came out to say, discussion of a Palestinian state is premature, and I'm not going to hold the construction of Jewish settlement in the Palestinian territories. In my views, this is really the push that will bring us down the cliff if it continues, because no Palestinian is going to accept to continue to live perpetually under Israel's full military occupation. And no Palestinian is going to tolerate the brutality and the atrocities committed by the Israeli army in the Palestinian territories. Because Israel is not protecting itself in the Palestinian territory, it is protecting the Jewish settlements in the Palestinian territory. And while we draw the line between recognizing Israel within the 1967 boundaries, we oppose and fight against Israel's occupation of our territories. That's our God-given right, because no nation, no people who falls under foreign military occupation will remain silent. If it happens in the United States, you will fight. If it happens anywhere else, you will resist. And so peace is possible. The principles, the foundation of peace are there. We can work it out. You will have a Palestinian people ready to sign an agreement with Israel and continue the peace process with Israel, because in my views, this is the only option that we have. Because the other option is, God forbid. And so I hope that all of us here and in the Middle East can work together to bring about a peaceful solution to the conflict that has plagued our two peoples for many, many years. We owe it to this generation of Palestinians and Israelis and to the future generations. And I hope that we will succeed. And I thank you very much.
Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we're listening to Hasan Abdul Rahman, Chief Representative of the PLO in the U.S. We will return in a minute for our traditional City Club questions and answers. First, a few announcements. Today's forum is the annual Barbara and Larry Robinson Family Foundation Forum, which recognizes a generous gift to the City Club Forum Foundation endowment from the Robinson family. And I'm pleased to say that with us today at the head table are well-known civic leaders, Barbara and Larry Robinson. We'd like to ask them to stand, receive our thanks. Now, we would like to return to Hasan Abdul Rahman for our traditional City Club question and answer period. Let me just say, in the spirit of the City Club, we want to ask everyone to be as respectful of each other and of our guests as possible. So we'll have our first question, please.
We agree that the lies being perpetrated are intertwined with this intractable conflict, and that, as you have said, we have to have respect for one another. The United States and Israel have proof that Islamic books and educational materials used today in the Middle East, and yes, even here in America, promote hatred of Jews and eliminating Israel, while Arab media promote anti-Semitism and anti-American sentiment. How then can there be a lasting peace when Palestinian children are being brainwashed to hate and destroy, and Palestinians celebrate terrorism, revere terrorists, and reward their families? How can we make the progress you envision if the terrorism continues and children are being educated in this manner?
Let me first of all say that I have not seen any Palestinian textbook that advocates hate against Israel, and I am willing to accept the people here in the City Club to be the judge. Bring your books that you are talking about, and I'm ready to come back here to look at those books, if they exist. I know what we have in our textbooks. I know. In our textbooks, there is no borders for the State of Israel. And that's very obvious and correct, because Israel does not have in its textbooks any borders for the State of Palestine. Israel have never told us what its borders are. Are the borders of the River Jordan the borders of Israel? If those are the borders, we are not going to recognize them. I want to see one single map of Israel by any Israeli official establishment showing me the borders of the State of Israel. I want to see one textbook in Israel that recognizes the right of the Palestinian people to a state of their own. And those books, Israeli books, precede the Palestinian Authority books. Israel is in existence for 54 years. I want to see one single book by an Israeli school, whether it's private or public, showing us, as Palestinians, that we had history in that land. So when there is denial from one side, the response is denial. When there is recognition, it is mutual. That's what I am trying to tell you from the very beginning. Israel denies the right of the Palestinian people to have a state of their own on the West Bank and Gaza. Israel does not have its borders declared. Israel does not have a constitution to say who is an Israeli and who is a Palestinian. I am the one, my family has 500 years of history in that town I was born in. I am not a citizen of my country. I cannot be. Because Israel does not acknowledge Palestinian citizenship. So before, and I'm appreciative of the question because I know that this question has been circulated by AIPAC to members of the Jewish community, because this question is always asked and it is textual. It is the same question wherever I go. And I can tell you what will be the next question and the after question, because I know them. I know them. I have heard them before. So that's why I said, look at yourself first before you throw a stone on me. if you want the Palestinians to, I want Israel, I want you, members of the Jewish community, to stand against Lieberman, who is a member of the Israeli cabinet, who advocates ethnic cleansing, transfer of the population. He's a member of the Israeli cabinet. Isn't this incitement? When you call for the transfer of the Palestinian population to Jordan, to Syria, to Lebanon, isn't this incitement? How can anyone tolerate in this 21st century someone as member of the Israeli cabinet who calls for ethnic cleansing? No Palestinians, no Muslims, no Jews only. Isn't this worth for you to look at and try to correct it? Not only one, but you have Aylon, you have Lieberman, you have Sharansky, you have a whole group, Shas. So I advise you that your effort is needed in Israel also, like our efforts is needed with our own people.
The Israelis blame the Palestinians for not signing on to the Camp David Accords in 2000 and say that it was the Palestinians' fault for causing this whole problem, as you mentioned before. I would like to know why the Palestinians believe what was offered at Camp David is unjust and unworkable and does not go with the full faith and what was established in Oslo in 1993.
What was offered in Camp David is the following. First of all, there was no offer made in Camp David, no formal offer. There was no document put to us by the Israelis. There were ideas floated by the Israelis through the American delegation. There was no offer. And again, please, anyone who has that offer in writing, please deposit it here, and I will look at it. Second, what was those ideas that were floated? First of all, 88% of the West Bank to us, which meant leaving 12% of the 22%. Those 12% is not to take a part of the West Bank, but it is to include the Jewish settlements within the State of Israel. Thus, will dissect the West Bank into 3 separate zones that are discontiguous. They will be like reservations, because also Israel, this 12% include control over the borders with Jordan. It will include control over the 2 water aquifers in the north and the south of the West Bank. And it also includes Israel control over the skies of the airspace of the West Bank. Second, on the issue of refugees, Mr. Eli Rubinstein, who was representing the Israeli delegation, said Israel has no responsibility whatsoever for the refugee problem. On the issue of the settlements, Israel wanted to keep the settlements. So this was unacceptable to us. But we did not say that this is the end of negotiations with Israel. We said, let's continue to negotiate. And we continued to negotiate until the 26th of January in Taba, in Stockholm, in Bowling, in Andrews Air Base. I was part of those negotiations. The intifada, or the violence, started when Mr. Sharon, on the 27th of September, led 2,000 armed men and went to Al-Aqsa Mosque, Al-Haram al-Sharif, and said, I am here to assert Jewish sovereignty over this place. I was sitting with Shlomo bin Ami, who is the foreign minister of Israel, Gilad Sher, who was the chief Israeli negotiator. We were all sitting at the Ritz-Carlton in the Pentagon City the day before. And we warned him, we said, Mr. Shlomo, please don't let Sharon go there. Because if he goes and says, I am here to assert the sovereignty of the Jewish people over this mosque and its environment, he is creating a conflict not between Palestinians and Israelis, but between Jews and Muslims. And he will turn this conflict, which is essentially a political conflict, into a religious conflict. We said that. We appealed to Dennis Ross, we appealed to President Clinton, please, to Ehud Barak. Yes, Arafat was having dinner at his house. He told him, please, don't let Sharon go there. We know why Sharon wants to go there. He wants to outbid Netanyahu for the leadership of the Likud party. But we cannot sacrifice this whole peace process for a quarrel between Sharon and Netanyahu. And obviously, Sharon was very successful because as a result, he became the Prime Minister of Israel. Even then, the first day of the people went to the street to protest Mr. Sharon's visit. 8 Palestinians were killed, without one Israeli getting wounded. Next day, Palestinians burying their dead people. 13 Palestinians killed. No Israeli is killed. Third day, 12 Palestinians. 4 days. By day number 4, we had 49 Palestinians killed at the hands of the Israeli army. And not one single Israeli killed. Because the Palestinians did not fire at the Israelis in the first 5 days. After that, Palestinians said, we are not going to listen to anybody. If the Israeli army is shooting at us, we will shoot back. And that's how the whole intifada continued. This is the report of Senator Mitchell. It is not my report. Go back and look at Senator Mitchell's report.
Mr. Rahman, several times today you've mentioned Yasser Arafat and the PLO. Yasser Arafat has had a rather, shall we say, spotty record on trying to bring peace to the part of the Middle East where he lives. For example, for many, many months, he was saying one thing in English and saying something else in Arabic about the suicide bombers. Only last week, or maybe this week, for the first time, that he said the same thing in Arabic that he said in English. Secondly, he and the PLO played a very important role in trying to smuggle 40 tons of high explosives into Israel. And furthermore, and finally, he and the PLO, in cooperation with Saudi Arabia and other states, have been paying very large sums of money to the families of suicide bombers. Now, how can Yasser Arafat really be, I won't say trusted, but how can he be entrusted to carry on the peace negotiation with that kind of a background?
Let me say the following. First of all, Yasser Arafat, not only this week, he said that on 2 separate occasions before. He made a speech in Arabic on December 16th, and he made another speech to the Arab Summit Conference in Arabic, and which was broadcast in Arabic on all Arab networks. So it was not the only, but having said that, I don't think that's really the issue. The issue, when Sharon came to power in February the year 2001, he made a declaration. He said, this is a military battle with the Palestinians and I have to win it. He did not say, this is a political issue between us and the Palestinians, let's negotiate it. And that's why he pushed tens of thousands of tanks and pushed tens of thousands of soldiers and used F-16 airplanes to attack civilian targets in the West Bank and Gaza. He used Apache helicopters. He continued the systematic destruction of the Palestinian society. Day one here. Now, yes, the Palestinian people is, if Sharon is declaring a war against them, they cannot not fight back. They cannot. Because even if Yasser Arafat tells them don't, he will be asking them to surrender. And Yasser Arafat's function is not to ask the Palestinian people to surrender. So when Mr. Sharon comes as a Prime Minister of Israel and declares that he wants to achieve military victory, and he has the biggest arsenal in the whole Middle East against, under the best of circumstances, few policemen who are armed with rifles and few irregular Palestinians. So some Palestinians felt that they need also to get weapons to fight Israel back. If Israel has the right to bring all its tanks and have nuclear bombs and have the machine guns and Apache helicopters. Palestinians do not have the right to defend themselves. Why not? I mean, why? Why in God's, the Israel have the right to invade our land and we do not have the right to defend ourselves? Why? Who said that this should be the case? So, not that I am supporter of the militarization of the conflict, but I'm explaining the situation that existed. So Yasser Arafat and the Palestinian people felt that yesterday, they interviewed one of those organizers of suicide bomber who was arrested by Israel, and they asked him. He said, you know, give me an F-16, and I assure you that I will not become a suicide bomber. He said that. He said, give me an Apache helicopter, give me a tank, and I assure you that I will not turn myself into. That does not justify anything, because I am opposed to suicide bombing, not because of what it does to Israel, but because of what it does to our society. I'm against it. And I said this on television, and I continue to say it. But that does not mean that the crimes committed by the Israeli army against the Palestinians have to be justified, neither by you nor by anybody else. And what disturbs me, that when an Israeli tank shoots a woman and her 2 children 2 days ago in the city of Tulkarem with a shell from a tank, a woman with 2 little kids, and the 3 are killed, I do not see the outrage from the Jewish community. And I don't see the outrage from the American Jewish community when atrocities are committed in the refugee camp of Jenin, because that also tells me that we are not taking an even-handed position. So let's not point fingers. Let's look for a way out of this, because that is the challenge we face. We owe it. We owe it to ourselves, we owe it to our children, we owe it to humanity.
Major funding for the production of the City Club Forum is provided by Nordson Corporation, a world leader in systems that apply adhesives, sealants, and coatings during manufacturing operations to make today's products work better and last longer. John Carroll University, educating tomorrow's leaders by inspiring academic achievement, building personal character, and fostering community service for men and women who make a difference.